March 1945. Dawn creeps over the Pacific like a blade of light. The sky above Japan is pale, trembling with the first murmurs of engines in the distance. On the airfields outside Tokyo, Japanese pilots stand by their aircraft. The once proud Zero fighters lined like silent sentinels. Exhausted mechanics wipe oil from their hands, watching the horizon where American bombers are expected to appear alone, as they had for weeks. But something feels different. A faint hum deepens. Low at first, then swelling into a rolling thunder that shakes the air itself. Pilots shade their eyes and stare upward. The sun catches on silver wings. Dozens, no, hundreds of them. P-51 Mustangs, their canopies glinting like mirrors of fire, descending from the high clouds in perfect formation. For a moment, no one speaks. Then a single voice whispers through a cracked radio. They're back. In that instant, fear spreads faster than sound. The illusion of safety dissolves. The sky that once belonged to Japan is no longer theirs. By early 1945, the Empire of Japan was suffocating under the weight of an unrelenting air campaign. Cities once untouched by war now burned nightly beneath the glow of American incendiaries. The Pacific, once a vast moat protecting the homeland, had turned into an open highway for the advancing U.S. forces. From Saipan to Tinian, American bases had crept closer with every passing month, each island captured at a cost of blood, but paving the way for one final goal: the invasion of Japan itself. The American B-29 superfortress had become the symbol of this phase of the war. It flew higher, faster, and farther than any bomber before it, carrying destruction across thousands of miles of ocean. But the early bombing raids came at a heavy cost. Without fighter escort, the long-range missions over Japan exposed the B-29s to swarms of Japanese interceptors. Even with superior speed and altitude, the bombers were vulnerable to concentrated attacks, especially during daylight runs. For the Japanese, these victories became moments of pride in an otherwise darkening war. In early 1945, morale within the air units briefly rose. Intelligence officers spread word that American fighter escorts were no longer a threat in the region. Many believed the U.S. had withdrawn its fighters due to logistical strain. The distances were too great, the fuel demands impossible, the pilots exhausted. The belief took root. The skies belonged once again to Japan. Yet that illusion was built on outdated assumptions. Unknown to most of Japan's pilots, the war had changed dramatically beyond their view. On February 19, 1945, the U.S. Marine Corps landed on a small, volcanic island called Iwo Jima. Barely 8 square miles in size, it was a speck of rock in the vast Pacific. But strategically, it was priceless. Sitting almost halfway between the Mariana Islands and Tokyo, Iwo Jima offered something no American airfield had before: a place where damaged B-29s could land, and where fighters could refuel before escorting bombers all the way to Japan and back. The battle for Iwo Jima was one of the most brutal of the Pacific War. For 5 weeks, Marines fought through volcanic ash and tunnels, as Japanese defenders refused to surrender. Nearly 7,000 Americans were killed, and more than 20,000 Japanese perished, many choosing death over capture. When the island finally fell, few on the Japanese mainland realized what it meant. To them, Iwo Jima was simply another island lost. But to the men planning the air war from the American side, it was a doorway, the key that would unlock the skies above Japan. Even as Japan's air forces continued to train new pilots, their resources were collapsing. Aviation fuel was scarce. Replacement aircraft were few. Veteran pilots were dying faster than they could be replaced. Many of the young men who now stood on airstrips outside Tokyo or Nagoya had only a handful of flight hours. Their instructors told them that honor, not victory, would guide them. Meanwhile, across the ocean, the U.S. Army Air Forces were preparing for a transformation. Engineers and commanders knew that the key to ending the war quickly was control of the air. Total, uninterrupted control. The B-29s could deliver destruction, but only if they were protected from Japan's desperate counterattacks. That protection would soon come in the form of a fighter that had already changed the course of war in Europe, the P-51 Mustang. Its pilots had flown through the flak-filled skies of Germany, escorting bombers all the way to Berlin and back. The aircraft's sleek design, powerful engine, and extraordinary range made it unlike anything the Japanese had yet faced in the Pacific. But transferring such aircraft across oceans, maintaining them in tropical climates, and coordinating them with bomber fleets required logistical miracles. Miracles that were finally becoming possible thanks to Iwo Jima. By March 1945, the first squadrons of Mustangs were being ferried to the island. Mechanics worked around the clock, preparing the runways while pilots studied maps of the Japanese homeland. The plan was ambitious. The Mustangs would take off from Iwo Jima, meet the B-29s over the Pacific, and escort them deep into Japan's airspace. The Japanese High Command still believed no such escort could exist, not with the distances involved. That belief would soon shatter. The day the P-51s first appeared over Japan was not just a tactical surprise, it was a psychological one. For Japanese pilots who thought the Americans had pulled back, it was as if the dead had returned to the P-51 Mustang was not born in the Pacific. Its story began thousands of miles away, in the skies over Europe, where long-range bomber crews had once prayed for salvation. At first, American bombers flying over Germany suffered staggering losses. Escort fighters like the P-47, Thunderbolt, and P-38 Lightning lacked the range to accompany them all the way to their targets and back. Pilots would watch their protectors turn for home, leaving them exposed to the deadly German Luftwaffe. Then, in late 1943, everything changed. The arrival of the North American P-51 Mustang transformed aerial warfare. Fitted with the Rolls-Royce Merlin engine, the Mustang combined speed, agility, and range in a way no other fighter could match. It flew higher, farther, and faster, and could escort bombers deep into enemy territory without refueling. Over Europe, the P-51 became a legend. It slashed through German formations, hunted down interceptors, and turned daylight bombing into a viable strategy. Its pilots earned names that still echo through Air Force history. Men like George Preddy, John Meyer, and Bud Anderson. But while Europe celebrated its triumphs, the Pacific remained an unsolved equation. Japan's air defense stretched across thousands of miles of ocean. No fighter in the American arsenal could fly from the Mariana Islands to Japan, engage in combat, and return safely. Even with the B-29's immense range, escort fighters were out of reach. American bombers flew alone, enduring flak and fighter swarms with nothing but their gunners for protection. That was until Iwo Jima fell. The island's capture opened a new chapter in the air war. Engineers quickly converted its rough volcanic terrain into one of the most vital airfields of the Pacific Campaign. South Field, followed by Central and North Fields. From there, the Mustangs could at last bridge the gap. Each sortie from Iwo Jima meant a 750-mile flight to the Japanese mainland. Long, grueling, and perilous, but possible. It was at this intersection of technology and geography that the myth of American disappearance was born. Japanese intelligence units, monitoring radio traffic and reconnaissance, had concluded that the Americans were suffering from overextension. Reports described damaged bombers crash landing at sea, suggesting the escort problem had not been solved. With confidence rising, Japan's military leadership began to reposition fighter units and concentrate defenses around urban centers, assuming attacks would remain unescorted. Meanwhile, on the Japanese side, disillusionment quietly spread among veteran pilots. The Zero, once the pride of the Imperial Japanese Navy, was aging. Designed for maneuverability, it had once dominated early in the war, but by 1945 it was obsolete. Its lightweight frame, once an advantage, had become a death sentence against faster, armored American aircraft. Replacement models like the Ki-84 Frank and the N-1K George offered improvements, but Japan's dwindling industry could not produce them in sufficient numbers. Fuel shortages forced pilots to ration practice flights. Some trained only through classroom diagrams and wooden mock-ups. Still, the idea of honor kept them flying. For many, death in battle was preferable to surrender. The arrival of the Mustangs, sleek, modern, and relentless, shattered not just their formations but their spirit. To them, these aircraft seemed to appear from nowhere, flying impossibly far, striking with precision, and vanishing back into the horizon. It was not magic. It was logistics, engineering, and relentless adaptation. The Americans had turned an isolated rock into the most valuable launch pad in the Pacific. By the time the Japanese realized the truth, it was too late. The sky they thought they had reclaimed was already lost again, and this time it would never return. The arrival of the P-51 Mustang over Japan represented a revolution in aerial tactics. Previously, the Japanese defenders had relied on concentrated formations of Zeros to intercept incoming B-29s, often using sheer maneuverability and dive attacks to overwhelm the bombers. Without long-range escorts, these tactics had inflicted some losses, but at an unsustainable cost. With the Mustangs now in the skies, American planners could shift from defensive to offensive strategies. The P-51s flew ahead of the B-29 formations, scouting for enemy interceptors and attacking them before they reached the bombers. Their speed allowed them to execute high-speed passes, forcing Japanese pilots into defensive maneuvers they could not sustain. Coordination with radar operators and bomber gunners created overlapping layers of protection that effectively neutralized traditional Japanese tactics. One squadron leader noted that in the first few raids escorted by Mustangs, Japanese interception attempts dropped by more than 70%. This tactical superiority ensured that B-29 crews could focus on bombing runs rather than evasive maneuvers, fundamentally shifting the war in the air. Human angle. For Japanese pilots, the psychological impact was profound. Many had grown accustomed to facing bomber formations with only limited resistance, their pride bolstered by a belief in invulnerability at high altitudes. The sudden appearance of Mustangs shattered this illusion. Diaries and letters from the period reflect fear, disbelief, and despair. One pilot wrote, "We thought the Americans had retreated. We were wrong. The sky is no longer ours." The sense of surprise, combined with the Mustang's superior speed and firepower, caused widespread panic during engagements. Even experienced veterans hesitated, their instincts outrun by a machine and a strategy they had not anticipated. Technological angle. The Mustang's design gave it unmatched advantages. The P-51B C models, powered by the Packard-built Merlin engine, could cruise at over 400 miles per hour while maintaining fuel efficiency that allowed for round-trip missions from Iwo Jima to Tokyo. Its 650 caliber M2 Browning machine guns could penetrate the Zero's fragile structure from distances that left Japanese pilots little chance to respond. Additionally, the aircraft's laminar flow wing design reduced drag, giving it superior maneuverability at high altitudes, the operational ceiling where B-29s flew. Japanese pilots quickly realized that their standard dogfighting tactics were ineffective. Attempts to engage the Mustangs often resulted in severe losses, undermining morale further. Leadership angle. American commanders meticulously planned the Mustang escort program. Leaders such as General Jimmy Doolittle and Colonel Gabby Gabreski understood that strategic bombing campaigns could only succeed with air superiority. They coordinated training, logistics, and deployment with precision. Squadrons were rotated carefully to maintain pilot readiness, while maintenance crews worked around the clock to keep the aircraft mission-ready. In contrast, Japanese leadership faced crippling shortages. Decisions were often delayed by communication breakdowns, fuel scarcity, and an inability to replace aircraft quickly. The disparity in leadership effectiveness became starkly visible during the first major Mustang sorties over Japan. Enemy perspective. From the Japanese side, the arrival of Mustangs was described, in both official reports and personal writings, as an unexpected terror. Pilots noted the surprise of encountering fighters they believed had been removed from the Pacific theater. Ground crews, tasked with scrambling Zeros to intercept, faced the grim reality of superior enemy technology. Reports indicate that many Japanese pilots attempted evasive retreats rather than engage directly, a rare concession in a culture emphasizing honor in combat. Even officers in command positions admitted that the Mustang's presence caused confusion and disrupted coordination, illustrating the psychological impact of technological dominance. Moral angle. While the Mustang represented efficiency and superiority for the Americans, it also underscored the human cost of total air dominance. Entire squadrons of Japanese pilots faced near certain death when attempting to defend against raids. Civilians below, already suffering under relentless firebombing campaigns, witnessed a sky increasingly dominated by machines rather than men. The psychological effect of this dominance extended beyond military calculations, shaping perceptions of inevitability, fear, and futility among the Japanese population. The combination of tactical precision, human fear, technological superiority, effective leadership, enemy disruption, and moral consequence created an environment in which the Mustang's presence was more than a mere addition to the sky. It was a symbol of the war's shifting balance, each angle interwove seamlessly, illustrating how strategy, technology, and psychology converged to redefine the aerial conflict. The emotional toll on Japanese pilots went beyond fear. It was the erosion of identity and confidence. These were men trained for courage, often told that death in battle was preferable to surrender. Yet, when faced with the sudden and overwhelming presence of P-51 Mustangs, even the most experienced pilots experienced a visceral sense of helplessness. Accounts from surviving airmen describe the surreal sight of silver wings glinting in the rising sun, diving in coordinated waves, and vanishing as quickly as they appeared. Letters reveal that some pilots openly wept before taking off, realizing that the skies they had dominated for years were no longer theirs. This psychological collapse was as decisive as any physical defeat. Strategic angle. The Mustang escort program did more than protect B-29s. It reshaped Japan's air strategy. Once the Mustangs were active, Japanese high command faced an impossible choice: continue sending fighters into near-certain death, or conserve their dwindling forces for last-ditch defenses. Any attempt to intercept B-29 raids was met with devastating losses. Strategically, the Mustangs enabled the United States to maintain consistent, accurate bombing campaigns with minimal losses, accelerating Japan's industrial collapse and eroding morale on both the military and civilian fronts. The impact was immediate and quantifiable. The introduction of long-range fighter escorts reduced bomber attrition rates from 20–25% to below 5% on major raids. Operational angle. From an operational perspective, the Mustang's integration required meticulous planning. Pilots had to synchronize with B-29 formations across hundreds of miles, navigating over open ocean with minimal landmarks. Radio communication, timing, and fuel management were critical. Any deviation could leave bombers exposed or pilots stranded. The logistical success of the program highlighted the American military's organizational capacity. Crews were rotated to prevent fatigue. Mechanics maintained aircraft under tropical conditions, and intelligence continuously updated flight paths to counter Japanese defenses. This operational excellence turned the Pacific into an environment where precision, timing, and coordination determined survival. Technological evolution, angle. The appearance of the Mustang over Japan also exposed the technological gap between the United States and Japan. Japanese aircraft were formidable early in the war, but by 1945, innovations like high-octane fuel, advanced engines, and reinforced airframes had transformed the balance. The Mustang's laminar flow wings, supercharged engines, and superior firepower made traditional interception methods almost irrelevant. Even advanced Japanese models such as the Ki-84 and N1K could not match the combined speed, range, and firepower of the P-51 in a head-to-head engagement. This disparity forced Japanese engineers to confront the limits of their industrial capacity, highlighting a technological inevitability that would shape the remainder of the conflict. Psychological warfare. Angle. The Mustangs also played a role in psychological warfare. Their sudden appearance created the illusion of omnipresence, forcing Japanese commanders to overestimate American capabilities. Reports indicated that pilots often hesitated to engage, assuming that any sortie would be met with overwhelming force. Ground crews and anti-air units also felt the pressure, knowing that even a single mistake could lead to devastating losses. The psychological dominance achieved by these aircraft magnified the physical effectiveness of the raids, demonstrating that air superiority was as much about perception as reality. Moral and ethical angle. Finally, the Mustang campaign forced both sides to confront ethical dilemmas inherent in modern warfare. For American pilots, the efficiency of the aircraft made engagements deadly but detached. Combat was conducted with speed, precision, and little opportunity for mercy. For Japanese pilots and civilians, the relentless nature of escorted B-29 raids emphasized the human cost of technological superiority. Families on the ground watched cities burn, while young pilots faced nearly impossible odds in the air. The conflict had become a mechanized struggle where human courage and honor collided with innovation and industrial might, underscoring the moral complexities of total war. These 6 angles — human, tactical, technological, leadership, psychological, and moral — converged to explain why the sight of P-51s over Japan was more than an operational surprise. It was a multidimensional shock that reshaped Japanese perception, disrupted military planning, and accelerated the collapse of air resistance. Each perspective reveals a layer of the conflict, highlighting the intertwined consequences of strategy, technology, and human emotion. As the first wave of engagements subsides, the Japanese Air Command scrambles additional units, desperate to reclaim control of the skies. From bases around Tokyo, trained pilots prepare to intercept the returning B-29 formations, unaware that the Mustangs are already in perfect position to meet them. Communications crackle with orders that arrive too late, as American radar coverage and flight coordination anticipate every move. The ensuing dogfights are swift, brutal, and overwhelmingly one-sided. P-51 pilots exploit every advantage: altitude, speed, and firepower. Groups dive from above, targeting the Japanese aircraft in coordinated pincer movements, maneuvers that once gave the Zero an edge. Tight turns, sudden dives, rapid climbs now fail catastrophically against the Mustang's superior aerodynamics. The Japanese pilots, trained for honor in combat, find themselves caught in situations no amount of skill can overcome. Over industrial suburbs of Tokyo, machine gun tracers streak across the sky. Zeros and Ki-84s ignite mid-air, spiraling toward the earth in trails of smoke. Even experienced pilots hesitate, frozen for brief, fatal seconds as the Mustang formation sweeps past. Some attempt to flee, diving toward mountains or rivers, only to be intercepted again. Observers on the ground note an eerie silence punctuated by explosions and the distant roar of engines. The emotional impact on Japanese airmen is immediate and devastating. Reports describe frantic radio chatter, voices trembling as formations break apart. Letters recovered after the war reveal the disbelief and despair of those who survived. They are everywhere. They appear and disappear at will. We cannot fight them. We cannot escape them. The sky is no longer ours. The phrase "silver ghosts" appears repeatedly, underscoring the almost surreal terror of the Mustang's dominance. American pilots, in contrast, maintain focus and discipline. Flight leaders coordinate attacks with precise timing, ensuring minimal overlap and maximum coverage. P-51 squadrons rotate in and out of the combat zone to maintain energy and effectiveness, while forward observation posts relay enemy positions in real time. The result is a lethal choreography. The Japanese interceptors are overwhelmed before they can mount effective attacks, and the B-29s proceed unscathed to drop their payloads over strategic industrial targets. By mid-afternoon, the tide is unmistakable. Japanese air defenses are fractured. Fuel shortages and damaged aircraft leave many pilots grounded or incapable of immediate deployment. The psychological toll is compounded as high-ranking officers witness firsthand the futility of traditional strategies. Previous doctrines emphasizing numerical advantage or individual heroism are rendered obsolete. Commanders face the sobering reality. The technological and logistical superiority of the Americans has rendered their tactics ineffective. At the same time, the Mustang escorts achieve their secondary objectives. Key Japanese airfields are strafed and partially destroyed, limiting the potential for immediate retaliation. Survivors of downed aircraft face capture or death, further eroding morale. The combination of physical losses and psychological shock creates a cascading effect. Remaining pilots hesitate in engagements, fearing annihilation before even entering combat. Reports from this period indicate an unprecedented collapse in Japanese air coordination. Groups that once flew with cohesion are now scattered. Orders are ignored or delayed. Ground crews are immobilized by fear, unsure whether to launch remaining fighters or conserve resources. The presence of the Mustangs has not merely defeated Japanese aircraft, it has paralyzed the command structure itself. By the end of the day, the strategic implications are clear. The P-51s have ensured that the B-29 bombing campaign will proceed with minimal interference. Japanese air superiority, once taken for granted, is irrevocably lost. The psychological shock experienced by pilots and commanders alike marks a pivotal turning point in the Pacific Air War. From this moment forward, the skies above Japan belong entirely to the Allies, and the myth of invincible Japanese air power has been shattered. The events of March 10, 1945, would resonate far beyond that single day. They signaled the beginning of sustained, unchallenged American air dominance, setting the stage for relentless bombing campaigns that would decimate Japan's industrial capacity. For Japanese pilots, the image of silver Mustangs tearing through the clouds would remain a haunting memory, a symbol of technological inevitability and strategic mastery that could not be overcome by courage. Alone, in the wake of the Mustang raids, the Japanese air forces faced a stark and undeniable reality. Dozens of aircraft had been destroyed, with many more damaged beyond repair. Experienced pilots, once the backbone of Japan's defensive capabilities, had been lost or psychologically broken by the overwhelming presence of the P-51s. What had begun as disbelief had hardened into despair. The once proud Air Force could no longer challenge American bombers with any meaningful chance of success. American reports from March 1945 confirmed the effectiveness of the Mustang escort program. The 15th, 21st, and 506th Fighter Groups recorded minimal losses while protecting B-29 formations, demonstrating the tactical and technological advantage the aircraft provided. Pilots described clear skies punctuated by brief, decisive engagements where Japanese interceptors were neutralized before they could threaten the bombers. The escort program had shifted the balance of power in the air permanently, reducing bomber attrition rates from approximately 20% on unescorted missions to less than 5%. For the Japanese military command, the consequences were immediate and far-reaching. Radar and communication networks reported gaps in coverage and frequent interception failures. Orders that had once coordinated hundreds of aircraft now reached scattered squadrons too late to matter. High-ranking officers faced a crisis of morale as they recognized that even strategic planning could not compensate for technological and logistical inferiority. Fuel shortages, aircraft scarcity, and inexperienced pilots compounded the problem, leaving Japan's air defense in a near irrecoverable state. Civilians, too, felt the impact indirectly. Cities that had previously been able to anticipate bombing raids based on Japanese fighter activity were now more vulnerable than ever. The Mustang's escort of B-29s allowed American bombers to strike with precision and consistency, inflicting unprecedented damage on industrial and urban centers. Factories, rail yards, and supply depots were destroyed, contributing to the rapid erosion of Japan's war-making capacity. The combined effect of physical destruction and psychological shock deepened a sense of inevitability among the population. The Americans controlled the skies, and with them, the course of the war. Meanwhile, surviving Japanese pilots struggled to maintain cohesion. Many wrote letters expressing fear, disbelief, and hopelessness. Ground crews reported that even those assigned to refueling and arming aircraft hesitated, uncertain if their efforts would make any difference. The sudden and overwhelming presence of the Mustangs disrupted training schedules, reduced sortie rates, and created logistical bottlenecks. For the first time, Japanese commanders realized that their previous assumptions that the Americans had withdrawn their long-range fighters were catastrophically wrong. Mustang dominance extended to strategic planning as well. The Japanese High Command was forced to reconsider where to deploy limited forces, which defensive positions to hold, and how to manage dwindling fuel and aircraft stocks. Traditional doctrines emphasizing bravery and numerical advantage were rendered largely irrelevant. Every engagement risked catastrophic losses, and the confidence that once guided Japan's fighter units had been shattered. The sight of P-51 Mustangs streaking across the skies of Japan in March 1945 marked more than a military achievement. It was a turning point in the human perception of war. For the Japanese pilots who watched these sleek fighters appear seemingly out of nowhere, it was a moment of shock and despair. The aircraft represented technological mastery, logistical precision, and the relentless determination of a force that had learned to integrate strategy, innovation, and human endurance. The sky, once a symbol of Japan's aerial pride, had become a stage for inevitability. From a broader historical perspective, the Mustang escort program illustrates the decisive impact of technological adaptation on warfare. Air superiority had shifted not through sheer numbers alone, but through careful coordination, superior aircraft design, and the ability to project power over previously unreachable distances. The P-51s ensured that strategic bombing could continue unchallenged, accelerating the collapse of Japan's industrial and military capacity. The psychological component, the disbelief, fear, and paralysis experienced by Japanese pilots and commanders, amplified the operational effectiveness of every sortie. The legacy of those days extends beyond military history. It reminds us of the human dimension in war, the courage, fear, and resilience of those involved on both sides. For Japanese pilots, the experience of being outmatched became a defining memory of loss and inevitability. For Americans, it was a testament to the power of ingenuity, coordination, and determination. In the end, the skies over Japan did not merely belong to a nation. They became a testament to the enduring consequences of technological mastery, strategic foresight, and the human spirit under the pressures of total war.